Where's Alfred? We got Catwoman over here with this ridiculous costume on. Batman's fighting a giant squid. He's blowing a dragon's head up with a hand grenade. You're telling me we don't have an Alfred appearance yet? Welcome to part 2 of Batman the Complete Retrospective, where I trace the evolution of the Dark Knight through his early days and watch him grow and evolve into one of the most popular characters in American fiction. If you're new here, then welcome, and if you're not, then welcome back. If this is your first time watching one of my retrospectives, then feel free to jump back to the beginning to see where we've been, but if not, then enjoy this one. In today's video, I'll be covering Detective Comics numbers 43 to 71, Batman 3 to 14, World's Best issue number 1, and World's Finest Comics numbers 2 through 8. These issues were published from September of 1940 to February of 1943, and they credit writers Bill Finger, Joseph Green, Edmund Hamilton, Jack Schiff, Don Cameron, and Joe Samoxon, and artists Bob Kane, Jerry Robinson, George Rousseau's, Fred Ray, Jack Burnley, and Ray Byrne. By late 1941, Jerry Robinson had taken over sole inking responsibilities on all of the Batman stories, while Bob Kane had moved to just penciling in order to keep up with the increased demand of all of these different Batman stories. By 1942, Jack Schiff, Edmund Hamilton, and Joseph Green had begun taking over some sparse writing responsibilities, while Don Cameron began regular writing across multiple titles. Around the same time, Jack and Ray Burnley began doing some sparse illustrating as well. Now that Batman had grown into one of the hottest properties in American comics, spanning 3 different simultaneous books, the creative team now had to expand beyond just the small pair of only Kane and Finger. By 1943, Batman had established a firm thematic and stylistic identity, and the variability that you saw from issue to issue takes a steep drop-off in these next 50 stories. And now, the tone remains relatively consistent from month to month. To cover this set of Batman's early adventures, let's trace his adventures through the lens of each one of his prominent villains, starting first with the Joker. And as a quick note, when I refer to Detective Comics from here on out, I'll just say DC to save myself a few syllables every time. Now, out of these 50 stories, Joker makes 12 appearances, making him the most prominent of Batman's villains thus far. And in these next 2 years, we can really see the Joker start to come into his own. And his most defining attribute by far is definitely his theatrics. He's leaving clues for Batman, he's calling out law enforcement on radio shows and through newspaper articles, and his signature flair for disguises and showmanship is truly what sets him apart from many of these early villains. In these chapters, we also see the Joker moving from being just a solo operator into attracting gangs of henchmen that are willing to do his bidding. And these men gravitate towards him not only for his brilliant mind, but also for his eccentric personality. He performs plenty of practical joke and mischief-based crimes, he escapes prison in plenty of zany ways, almost kills Robin nearly every time, fakes his own death, and tries to publicly embarrass Batman every chance he gets. He's also now seen living in a Joker-themed mansion, which I think is a bit tacky, but I'll let it slide. We also see the first scene where the Joker has Batman trapped and unconscious, but he refuses to remove Batman's cowl and learn his identity. He proclaims out loud that he actually loves the chase between him and Batman, and that to reveal Batman's identity would actually be taking all of that excitement away. This is an early exploration of the concept that Batman and Joker are really just 2 sides of the same coin, and that neither is really complete without the other. He's also very into leaving clues behind, and I wonder if maybe this attribute in later stories is going to be stripped back a bit as they start to give some of those things to the Riddler in later years. As far as Catwoman goes, we actually only get 2 appearances, first in Batman 3 and then in Batman 10. In Batman 3, they actually kiss for the first time, which Robin is very much not in favor of, and it's in this issue where she debuts her costume for the first time, which I hate. I don't like it. Don't like this costume. Why would you wear that? It's just a cat's head. How did you make that? Who did you commission to make that? Did you make it yourself? In Batman 10, we finally get her name too, which is not Selina Kyle at this point, it's actually Marguerite Tone. And she's actually a rich girl who throws lots of parties amongst the high society of Gotham City. Now, Doctor Strange does make 1 appearance in DC 45, and he develops a very early incarnation of what's eventually going to be Scarecrow's fear toxin. He calls it fear dust, and it operates in the way that you would assume, just making people deathly afraid when they're exposed to it. But even though the Scarecrow will later use something like like this, Doctor Strange seems to be the only one who has this kind of weapon. And speaking of, the Scarecrow actually gets his first appearance in World's Finest number 3. So far, we don't have any other reappearances besides just this one, but he does make quite an impact. Like I touched on with Doctor Strange, Scarecrow actually doesn't use any technology or weaponry at this point. He's pretty much just a professor of psychology at the local university. All of his co-workers call him a scarecrow because of all of his raggedy clothes that he wears, and once he gets fired from his job, he decides to turn to crime. Okay, let me lay out the Scarecrow's plan because it's ridiculous. Okay, so this guy is a professor of psychology, and he decides that fear is a really great motivator for human beings to do what you want them to do. So he decides to sell his talents to a bunch of mobsters so that they can use him to go scare people into giving them what they want. Okay, so the mobsters are gonna pay him to scare people into doing what they want. So what does he do? He doesn't have fear toxin yet. The Scarecrow just dresses up like a scarecrow and then holds people at gunpoint and is like, hey, do this thing that this mobster wants you to do. But all he's doing is he's just threatening them with a gun. Like, why are you hiring this guy? Why don't you go threaten them with a gun? Why are you paying him? He's a professor of psychology. Look, all I'm saying is that Dr. Crane is very lucky that he didn't threaten anybody who wasn't scared of spindly academics wearing Spirit Halloween costumes, because then things would have gone very poorly for him, I think. Clayface makes one reappearance in DC 49, but there's not really much to say here. He pretty much just starts killing people on a movie set again, and then he doesn't really make any reappearances after that. But we're gonna keep rolling with all of these villain first appearances, because in DC 58, we get the first appearance of the Penguin. He became so popular after his first outing that he made 4 more appearances just in this set of 50 stories. And while the Joker may be the most prominent of Batman's villains so far, I would say that the Penguin is probably the smartest and craftiest of all of his villains. He does a really good job at coming up with complicated and lucrative schemes and enlisting men into his ranks to do the dirty work for him. Plus, we don't really know that much about him yet, despite that he's apparently very wealthy and that his name is Mr. Boniface. It's not Oswald Cobblepot, as it's later going to become. Penguin's main weapon in his arsenal is his trick umbrella, which has been shown to hold anything from bullets to acid to paint to smoke bombs and even explosives. And finally, in DC 66, we get the first appearance of my personal favorite Batman villain, Two-Face. And not only is he my favorite Batman villain, he's actually my favorite villain introduced so far in these stories. Keeping in the tradition of the names being slightly different than the ones they'll later be, Two-Face is actually Harvey Kent, the district attorney, not Harvey Dent. I don't know where that name is going to change, but I'm interested to see when it does. And this is the first villain that actually gets a fleshed out backstory. As Gotham City's district attorney, he was in the process of prosecuting a mobster named Boss Maroni in court when he was publicly attacked and he had acid thrown on his face. And this brutal attack fractures his mind, splitting it into both good and bad halves. He uses a silver coin that he takes from Boss Maroni, scarring one half just like his own face is. And he starts flipping this coin to have it make his decisions rather than leaving it up to his own will. He talks about how what happened to him was some sick twist of fate, and that how from now on, he's gonna leave everything up to fate. When the cops eventually try and shoot and kill Harvey, it's Batman who defends him, yelling that this man was once his friend, and that he hopes that there's some way to reform him. I spoke briefly last episode about some of the things that Batman can never quite get over, and one of those things is the death of Jason Todd. But I would also say another one that's not spoken about as much is the madness of Two-Face, and it's something that Batman saddles himself with and thinks about over and over again. If maybe he could have done something different and prevented this very good man from turning into a monster. This is Kane and Finger at their best, when they slow down and actually decide to create a villain that has a complicated backstory that we can empathize with and maybe we could even take pity on. But even though Kane and Finger really start to find their tone here, there is plenty of wackiness that's still going on. Let's go back to that list I made last video of all of the weird things that seem to exist in this universe. So in these issues, we've got a serum that can hypnotize over long distances. We have a serum that makes you ugly. That's it. It just makes you ugly. We have a machine that can transport you to any world in any book. And so by proxy, we have dragons and witches and cyclopses. We have a truth machine. We have a serum that's based on radium that can resurrect the dead. We have curses, just generic curses. And we have a serum that makes you lazy. Why are we making all these serums? Why does everyone have a serum? Also, like I mentioned at the very top, Batman gets himself into the oddest situations. He fights a giant squid and he stabs it to death. And then later he fights storybook dragons and he kills one of them by throwing a live grenade into its open mouth and blowing its head up. Plus, Batman and Robin give chase on plenty of modes of transportation, including skis and roller skates, and I think a speedboat with Robin on the wakeboard in the back. Batman also has a bare-chested boxing match where he's just wearing the cowl and shorts, and he wins that. And he also impersonates a football player and just wins the football game for everybody. Also, Batman and Robin survive being out in a hurricane. They just lash themselves to a tree while Batman's bleeding out from all of his bullet wounds. And oh my goodness, it is pun city over here, man. There are so many puns. There's like a pun every page. Anyone telling you that the Adam West Batman TV show is too goofy, or it's too campy, or it's not faithful enough to Batman, they need to go read some of this early stuff. Because I'm now feeling like that TV show is the most faithful piece of Batman media that's ever been made. And one of my favorite pun moments is when Robin hurls this water pail at this criminal and hits him in the head, and he goes, "Boy, you're looking mighty pale." And that one even has Batman stop and like take a second and go, "Hey Robin, that sucked, man. You have got to do better." But on a different subject, we finally get the Batmobile. It makes its appearance first in name only in DC 48, but then by Batman number 5, we see it in all of its glory. We also get the Bat Signal in DC 60, which is stationed on top of police headquarters, which they can turn on anytime that the commissioner needs to talk to Batman. We also see that Batman has a direct telephone line straight to the commissioner's office. We also get the establishment of a tunnel that exists underneath Wayne Manor and leads to an old barn, so that Batman can enter and exit without revealing his identity. Batman does not have the Batcave yet, but we do see in Batman number 12 a full schematic map of all of the rooms that exist beneath Wayne Manor and the old barn. Plus, he does now have a trophy room where he keeps a lot of the items from various adventures. Gotham City is finally established as the place of residence for Batman in number 4, and at 3 different points in these 50 stories, 3 different people learn Batman's identity, but they end up dying by the end of the issue anyways, kind of returning us to a status quo. In World's Finest number 7, we get the appearance of Batman's first environmental suit, which is his white camouflage snowsuit. And it is so good. It looks so good. Whoever came up with this, like, bravo. Bob and Bill, whichever one of you guys came up with this, awesome job. But you also don't get off the hook because you also made the Catwoman suit, so 2 sides of the same coin. Also, you may be devastated to hear, but Bruce and Julie Madison did break off their engagement, and Bruce has now started to see a woman named Linda Page. Linda actually makes a ton of appearances, and I would say that besides Batman, Robin, and Commissioner Gordon, she's probably the most frequently appearing character in the entire series. Linda used to be a high society girl, but now she works as a nurse because she tells Bruce that she wants to do some good in the world. She does seem to like Bruce a lot, and she continues to see him, but she does remark about how she wished that he cared about things more, that he was more adventurous, that he was more like Batman. Should we tell her? I feel like we should tell her. Also, just a miscellaneous fact, Batman knows ventriloquism. He just knows ventriloquism. He never explains how he got that skill. He just does. He also loves disguises. This guy, oh my goodness. He's throwing on a disguise every single issue. He's doing it more than the Joker. We also get a ton of more gadget appearances. Some of my favorites being rocket-powered roller skates and a wristwatch camera. Plus we get some upgrades to the Batplane, one of which being an early incarnation of the grappling hook, and another one being the fact that it's now amphibious. It can go from air to water and from water back to air. But no matter what's happening in universe, we also can't forget about what's happening in America as a whole right now. We have entered World War II, and we are 2 years into World War II by the end of these 50 issues. And we can see aspects of this wartime life everywhere. Some of those aspects are a little more subtle, like in one issue where a criminal enterprise goes about stealing cameras because they become so rare because during wartime nobody's making cameras. We also get little comments here and there from Batman about how conserving metal and conserving rubber are really important things to do because they're gonna end up going to the war effort in Europe and the Pacific. And other times they just straight up hit you over the head. I mean, a lot of these covers show Batman and Robin and Superman just telling you to buy war bonds and war stamps. And there's plenty of times where Batman just tells you that it's really important that you need to be supporting the war effort right now. In fact, in Batman number 14, he fights his first Nazi. And we've still got 2 years until the war ends, and I imagine that a lot of these things are only going to heat up in that time. But for now, we'll just have to wait and see, because we've officially hit the end of the line when it comes to these issues. Folks, if you made it this far, I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching. And if you like these retrospectives, make sure to support my channel by subscribing and giving this video a like. But for now, have a good one, and I'll see you next time.